Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend. I know a lot of us were watching what became Hurricane Debby, and Debby, of course, making landfall early this morning on the northeastern Florida coast there of the Gulf of Mexico around Steinhatchee, Florida, as a Category 1 hurricane with winds at 80 miles per hour. And it is currently moving inland and has been downgraded to a tropical storm. The coordinates are there on the left-hand side of your screen, including the wind speed and the pressure, and that was from the 10 o'clock advisory. There will be another update coming up at 1 o'clock here later this afternoon. But this, now that it's moved onshore, and I will say fortunately it moved onshore in a relatively unpopulated part of Florida, but now, because of the remnants of this tropical storm and then eventually be a tropical depression, it's going to be slowing down quite a bit, and we're going to see a major flood threat, we think, over the southeastern United States. We'll get to that, plus anything else that's going on across Acadiana. It is a sunny day out there today. Temperatures are quite hot. We do have a heat advisory in effect. Current temperature 96 with a dew point of 75, so that's setting the heat index now here in Lafayette at 109 degrees, and that heat index could be flirting with 112 for a while today, and I think that temperature is going to be pushing very, very close to the 100-degree mark, and I don't think we're going to be able to escape the week without a 100-degree high temperature at least one day before the week is over. As far as any rainfall, there really isn't a whole lot that's out there. We've got a few widely scattered showers here along the coast over southeastern portions of Louisiana, but all the big stuff, of course, is over here. Let's go ahead and grab this radar here. All the big stuff is here over Florida, where Debby made landfall, and you can see the center of circulation about ready to cross the I-10 corridor. Many of you might be familiar with that area, driving I-10 eastward. If you head off to the Atlantic coast, I know a lot of us kind of put the brakes on here somewhere along this part of the Gulf Coast because we hit the beaches. But if you're familiar with areas east of Tallahassee, right around Live Oak is where we're seeing the tropical storm right now. That's the center of circulation. You can see there's just a ton of rain that's now spread into portions of Georgia, and that is going to be the case here over the next several days, as what is left of Debby will probably kind of scoot its way into this area. There is some forecast that it's going to push back offshore for a little while and then perhaps come back onshore like that. So, and that's not going to be until probably sometime on maybe Saturday or so. So this particular area of the southeast is really going to get hit hard with a lot of tropical moisture pulled in off the Gulf as well as the Atlantic Ocean. So even though the center of circulation is over land and it will weaken, it's still going to be able to pull from a couple of different water sources there. And I think a significant flood event is going to happen over parts of the southeast. It reminds me, it's very similar to what Tropical Storm Alberto did in 1994 that created a major flood over Alabama, Georgia, and the panhandle of Florida. Same kind of thing, pulled inland off the Gulf of Mexico and then just sat there for a number of days. And the reason why I remember Tropical Storm Alberto back in 1994 is because it was really the first tropical system that I got to forecast while living here in Louisiana. So that was one of the very first ones that I ever worked with in the business while I was living here along the Gulf Coast. Looking at the satellite imagery, you can see Tropical Storm Debby is there. We've got more of a ridge of high pressure that kind of broke apart, allowing it for more of a northerly flow, which fortunately kept it away from Louisiana. But that ridge is going to start to rebuild, we think, and that's why we're seeing the stall. And most of the models were pretty right on when it came to that stall too. Not only did the models do fairly well bringing Debby across the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but many of them were forecasting that stall as well. So this is what we're looking at here over the next several days. And in fact, it may still be a tropical depression there over maybe southern Virginia as we head into the weekend. So this is going to rain itself out there over the next several days, and it's a major flood threat there from Savannah on up to Charleston. Some of the forecasts for the 5-day rainfall totals could be between 20 and 30 inches of rain, and I wouldn't be surprised to see even more rain than that in some isolated areas. But much of northern Florida, southeastern Georgia, the coastal sections or the low country there of South Carolina, and then getting into parts of North Carolina, anywhere between 12, 24 to possibly up to 3 feet of rain could be falling over those areas. So Tropical Storm Debby not done yet, even though it's going to be downgraded to a tropical depression probably sometime either tonight or tomorrow. It's going to rain itself out, and it's going to cause a lot of problems there along the I-95 corridor. As far as the effects on us, we are seeing more of a northerly flow, and even though it's very hot out there with that northerly flow, that offshore flow in place, it does tend to lower the humidities a little bit over Louisiana. So even though our actual temperatures are still going to hit 100, those heat index values are probably going to stay about 111 or less. But we do have some rough seas there off the southeastern Louisiana coast. Maybe you got some friends that might be out there fishing over around Grand Isle. Could be some issues there. Or maybe you've got a family that might be working in the Gulf of Mexico. I bet they're seeing some much larger swells out there, maybe getting into the 10-foot range there over the far eastern waters of Louisiana. Gulf of Mexico, of course, you can see where hurricane, or what is now Tropical Storm Debby, moving there over Florida. And then much of the Gulf of Mexico is generally clear, with the exception of a few widely scattered showers there off the coast near Grand Isle. And I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of action here in the Gulf of Mexico over the next several days, nor in the Caribbean, or rather the Central America. We're going to see generally fair conditions there. But there are some things that we're watching over the far eastern Caribbean. There's a tropical wave near the Windward Islands. Going to get to that and go into that in more detail here in just a second. But looking at a big tropical wave that's coming off the African coast here. So this is another one that we'll be watching. And basically, even though Debby is coming in and you've got a tropical wave there and you've got that other tropical wave over the far eastern Caribbean, it's just showing us that we're just in the beginning of August. So truly, hurricane season is really just getting started. So do not let your guard down. I did have a comment on Facebook earlier talking about, or I believe is here on YouTube, talking about, boy, it's amazing how South Central Louisiana seems to miss so many of these major hurricanes. And you know, part of that I also think is, I know we're so lucky that we've missed any, but we've also, our luck is eventually going to run out. And that's kind of what my big worry is, especially when there's a forecast for such a busy season. So let's get right into our new tropical wave, which is here over the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea. It's right about there, and it's going to continue to drift off toward the west. When we left you on Friday, even though we focused more of the attention on Debby, I did mention that the GFS was starting to pinpoint something coming across the Caribbean Sea and then heading over toward the Gulf of Mexico, and even some unusual looking strikes over the western part of the Gulf Coast, which unfortunately would make a lot of folks around the Houston area quite nervous. And I am going to go through the kind of the forecast model suite here of our global models, because again, Debby, even though we've got all the recon data in there and we can work with the short range models and the high resolution models, when we're talking about a tropical wave that might be 7, 8, or 9 days away, we kind of got to go all the way back and look at the global models and then just kind of start from scratch on this forecast for this particular wave. But we do think that there could possibly be some development maybe the day after tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, over the Central Caribbean. And then there still will be at least a 30% chance for some development as the wave continues to move off toward the west, even toward the Bay of Campeche. So we don't think we're going to see any development here in the near term, which is why they've got the arrow kind of pointed over to that yellow shade. But anywhere in this particular area over the next 7 days, there's a possibility we could see something becoming a tropical depression. So let's go through the model suite here, and we're going to start with the GFS, and you can see Debby moving away. And then this is taking us out to August the 15th. So we're going out 10 days, and you can see that it does bring a low pressure area over the western Gulf, and actually a fairly deep low pressure area as we get into closer to the Texas Gulf Coast. So we watch it right about there, and then it continues to move into the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see it does drop off into the about 960s on the pressure. So that is probably forecasting a hurricane, generally with a strike here over the Texas Gulf Coast, which has already been hit with Alberto, Chris, and Beryl. All three, even Beryl was the one that caused the most significant issues for Texas. Both Alberto and Chris did bring a lot of rain to portions of southern Texas. The Euro model, on the other hand, going out 10 days, is not really showing much of a significant wave. It's just kind of showing a lot of moisture out here over the Gulf of Mexico as you get into about August the 13th, 14th, and 15th. So it's kind of following this wave in this direction. And then as you get to the end of the model run there, you start to see more rain over the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So that would be an indication of where the tropical wave will be going, but not necessarily forecasting a tropical system. Canadian model is a little bit more like the GFS, although it does show a low pressure area, but notice as it moves across, it kind of goes inland over the western part of the Bay of Campeche, and the Icon model doesn't quite go out that far, but it is showing quite a bit of moisture moving over the southern part of the Caribbean, and then maybe some of that moisture there working across the Yucatan Peninsula into the southern Gulf of Mexico as you get toward the latter part of the model run. But again, the Icon model isn't really showing any deepening low pressure there. So the GFS and the Canadian are picking up on something, with the GFS targeting more areas along the Texas Gulf Coast, while the Canadian model is forecasting something to move across the Bay of Campeche. But again, this is 10 days away. We've got a lot of time to watch this, but I will say that the GFS performed very well with Hurricane Beryl, and it also performed pretty well with Hurricane Debby. It was the first one to really forecast that stall, even though the GFS was kind of all over the place early on. It was really the only one that forecasted a Gulf hurricane rather than an Atlantic hurricane. So far the GFS has been performing pretty good during the 2024 hurricane season. Water temperatures are definitely fine. They're not going to be an issue inhibiting any development. All of our water temperatures are above 28 degrees Celsius, so you're talking about 83 to 84 degrees and higher, and much of the Gulf of Mexico, even with Hurricane Debby there moving in parts of the eastern Gulf, really hasn't shut anything down. There's a lot of tropical cyclone heat potential there because the warm waters go very deep. So even with Debby moving across the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, doesn't seem like it was able to churn up enough cold water to really cool those temperatures down. So everything is staying pretty mild there as far as the water temperatures go. Shear, on the other hand, is fairly light now where the tropical wave is currently situated, which is here over the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. But there's some moderate wind shear here across the middle part of the Caribbean Sea, and then you've got some shear out here over the far western part. We'll have to see what happens when it comes to the wind shear and if things do relax once again as our tropical wave makes a journey out here westward across the Caribbean Sea and then on into the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. During the month of July, again, or rather August, most of most of the Atlantic Ocean is open for business when it comes to tropical systems. So not too surprised there that we've got another tropical wave. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have another tropical wave perhaps develop over the central part of the Atlantic here sometime later this week. And it has been forecast to be a very busy hurricane season. Haven't shown you this graphic in quite some time, but the update that Colorado State put out for July the 9th not only exhausts the hurricane storm name list and go into the auxiliary list, but it's also calling for a high number of hurricanes, which we've already had 2 now, and also a high number of major hurricanes, but so far we've had 1. The team over at Colorado State University will have an update on this forecast tomorrow, and we will go over that tomorrow on Let's Talk Tropics. So got Debby that's going to continue to go ahead and move off toward the northeast, and hopefully it'll start to move a little bit more, but I really think we're going to see a significant flood event there for portions of the southeast. Again, some of those rainfall totals could be as high as 20 or 25 inches. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. Go ahead and like this video if you wouldn't mind, and subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. Of course, we do Acadiana weather today, which is just a short morning forecast, kind of give you an idea what's going to happen during your day. And then Let's Talk Tropics, we go live every weekday afternoon at noon. I'll have another update on Debby coming up on my social media pages. If you want to check those out on Facebook, I'm Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today. You can follow that. And then on Twitter, I am at Dave Baker TV, and you can follow those as well. So when we're not on here for on YouTube, you can get some updates throughout the day. I hope you have a great afternoon. Try to stay cool. Again, we're forecasting a high today of 99 degrees. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker, and I'll see you on Tuesday.